Hi, and welcome to Haydn Behind the Music Stand. I'm your host, Patty Ryan, and with me is Hakeem Bilal, who is the bass trombonist of C Street Brass, a brass quintet based in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania that tours internationally, has had residencies across America, and prioritizes programming a fun concert-going experience. He is also the assistant professor of trombone at West Virginia University, bass trombonist in River City Brass Band, one of America's only full-time 30-piece brass band, Beauty Slap, a thunder funk band that plays a wide variety of genres, and finally, New Deco, based in Miami, Florida, which is a genre-bending orchestra that finds creative ways of blending musics of the world to the classical realm. With his band, Beauty Slap, he is a co-host of the podcast, The Plain Pod, and they discuss whatever is on their mind that day. And we'll be talking about his passion for building and crafting something from the ground up, from mixology to video games. Welcome, Hakeem. Thanks for being on the podcast.
Hi, Patty. Thanks for having me. Hi. I really appreciate that.
Sure, of course. So when I look for guests, I also try to find people that are of diverse instrumentation. And I was talking to my good friend, Gabrielle Glass, who has been a guest on the podcast. And she said, why don't you interview Hakeem? And I was like, oh yeah, that's right. C Street Brass is out there. And, you know, funny enough, we might have overlapped in Steamboat, Colorado.
Did.
Yeah, with Strings Music Festival.
Back in 2017, I think we might have shared a moment, not even knowing that 4 years later, we would be here today.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I know, it's nuts. But in addition to that, you know, we also have a very close mutual friend, Meredith Riley, who also was a previous guest on the podcast. So you can go listen to their episodes. But
two unicorns.
Absolutely. Totally. I'm so excited for you to be here. I feel like because we have these two mutual friends and the mutual experience of going to Sun Pies together in Steamboat Springs, Colorado, it's like we are just meant to collide in some way. Can you tell me about Commander Socks?
Yes, I'm so glad you asked about Commander Socks. Commander Socks was my mascot, my best friend, my confidant, and he was also the only being that pooped in my shoes more than 5 times. So his name, Commander Socks, he had to earn that name.
Right, because he started as private, as you're explaining.
Yes. He started out when I first got him, which was during my undergrad. I want to say my sophomore or junior year at Peabody in Baltimore. I found him behind my apartment building with my neighbor underneath a dumpster, and he could hear this, this meow. He was weeks old and matted and full of just fur, and he had dreadlocks, and so. But my neighbor downstairs had some kittens before, and I never had a domestic cat. I had some alley cats when I was growing up. Living in DC. Growing up, I befriended several alley cats that would come and just want food and hang out. So I was grateful to have this neighbor who knew what to do in the situation. So got him his shots, got him all cleaned up, and then basically the neighbor's like, "Listen, I can't take this cat. You want him?" I'm like, "Yes, I would love to have Commander Socks." And within the first week, I want to say he stayed underneath my couch. As most cats do in new environments. They're like, "Listen, I'm gonna stay in this most comfy place where you can't get me until I feel like it's safe to come out."
Right.
And it took him about a week, but once he came out, I want to say he completely just showed all kinds of personality.
Came into his own.
He came into his own.
He owned your apartment.
Oh yeah, and he was strutting within a week. Like he was, it was all his.
Yeah.
And I was cool with that because he deserved it. He had a good life ahead of him. And so he was a private though. So I would go and perform, or I would go out of town for a weekend, or even like a day. I'd come home and I would find that he left me a present, a gift in my shoes. Or, better yet, if I left for an extended weekend, sometimes he would leave something in the bathtub, which was considerate because it's a little easier cleanup.
No kidding, yeah.
But still, we had some growing pains.
I see.
And I devised a system every month that he would not defecate in my shoes. I would promote him. And so this went from private to, I think he was Sergeant Socks for at least a year. And I would give him a buffer. If he had one good month and one bad month, we'd kind of even it out.
Okay.
But there was a lot of rank changing. And I think after a while, for a couple of years, he definitely just shot up. He really accelerated through the ranks and gained commander status.
He would never go the opposite direction. You would never be demoted and then have to...
Oh, no, he did. He got demoted.
Oh, okay.
Oh, yeah. I feel like the demotions were so dramatic, and he understood. Like, listen, man, you're being demoted this week, this month. It's unacceptable.
And he got his tail between his legs, kind of.
Bushy tail. He's a mix of a Maine Coon and a tabby.
Oh, Oh,
So
I didn't realize.
just imagine the
Big
bushiest
cat.
tail, big cat, big
Yeah.
paws, big face, golden, it's just orange cat. Total ladies man. Yeah, so Socks lived a good life. He lived with me throughout my schooling up until I moved to Texas, and at that point he moved in with my family, my mom and particularly my grandmom, and so he lived kind of in DC. He was like a free range kitty within the streets of DC, urban kitty.
Yeah, nice. Got to go back to his roots, so to say.
Yes, he did. He went back home, and he sadly passed away a couple of years ago.
Yeah, I'm sorry to hear that.
But he lived such a great life. I'm glad to know that his memory lives on.
Right. So rest in peace forever, Commander Socks.
My homie, forever homie.
Okay, Hakeem, are you ready for some Spitfire questions?
Oh, yes.
Mozart or Beethoven?
Beethoven.
Shostakovich or Prokofiev?
Why did you do this to me? See, okay, so college me would have said Shostakovich, but adult me is saying Prokofiev. Wow, Prokofiev 3.
Oh, well, I mean, yeah, how can you beat that? That's such a great symphony. And I'm sure it's such an amazing brass part.
It's chaotic.
Yeah.
It is so chaotic. You don't see that often. It's so crazy. Shostakovich also wrote some amazing brass parts, obviously, that the Fifth Symphony and the 10th and the 12th. But Prokofiev, along the similar line, it just embraced this cacophony of chaos, especially in his Third Symphony. I had recently performed that with the Cleveland Orchestra, and I didn't even know about it until I was playing it, and it's dark.
Mm-hmm.
It's so dark.
Yeah.
Sorry in the rapid fire. Sorry, yeah. I totally just derailed the rapid
I just
fire.
didn't know if
2
you were
questions in.
Okay, Netflix or video games?
Video games.
Yeah, right. That's part of your outside interest.
Yeah, it's like it's a legit no-brainer for me, and I do have a Netflix, but I barely use it.
Yeah. Basil or cilantro?
I have a basil plant at home, but I'm going to say cilantro. I use it more. But I have a beautiful 3-foot basil plant in my home that I'm proud of. It's not doing so well in the winter, but it's hanging on.
Yeah, like every other plant. Mm-hmm. Harry Potter, Star Wars, or Lord of the Rings?
Star Wars, and then Lord of the Rings.
Oh, okay. Symphony or chamber music? Well, actually, I don't know.
That is such a tough one. Oh, chamber music.
Oh.
Yep. I'm sticking to it.
No, I'm just not gonna.
You could look at my face and see I'm just cringe, chamber music. Oh.
Yeah, but symphony, but chamber. Yeah. Today it's chamber music. Tomorrow it's symphony.
Exactly.
There you go. Coffee or tea?
Coffee. These are the toughest questions ever. I love coffee. I have a really nice setup of that. It's a part of my morning routine of pour over and just it's therapeutic and love the taste of coffee. But I also appreciate the fine art of brewing tea. I think it's harder to brew loose tea, and you can get a lot of history and flavor from tea. Yeah. It's so incredible. It's so meditative as well. Yeah. So my heart is with coffee. My mind is with tea.
Wow.
I just made that up. That sounds pretty good.
Yeah, it did sound really, I was like, that's really profound. Anyway, favorite practice room?
Yeah, you just unlocked something that I didn't even know that I gravitated towards a specific practice room, but it's the basement of large buildings. So the basement of Peabody, there was a wing that was deep in the trenches of the school. It was the dungeon, but there were really nice practice rooms down there, and I would spend a lot of time down there in my undergrad. And doing grad school in Texas, there was a similar style dungeon in one of the bottoms of the dormitories that I would spend. It was like my dojo. Got it. And something about being, going down into a basement and coming up into the light more chiseled within technique or musicianship.
Or it's like this mental mindset of going down, crafting, coming back up a better musician and just repeating that. Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, but I didn't think about that. I don't go up to practice often. My office in my school is in the basement. And so I feel like I have that same mentality.
Yeah. Okay. So you're never one of those brass players that ever practices outdoors and under a tree or something like that.
Oh, I do. I do that. That's where my initial
thought went to, though.
Yeah, initial thought was like, man, I love those basement sessions. A lot of progress happened there. But also, from those basement sessions, I was able to take my horn to incredible places, like the top of a mountain, 13,000 feet in the air, or in Europe or in China, and playing it outside. It's like I really appreciate that. And I think that the basement sessions help me get to bring the horn out into the world everywhere else.
Okay, cool. Favorite professor shout out?
Wow. There are a couple Peabody professors. Dean Houston, who taught me some theory, taught me a lot of life. Then there was Professor Sprinkle.
Is that real? His name is Professor Sprinkle?
Ray Sprinkle, yeah.
Wow.
He
Wow.
was
What a name.
he was
Ray Sprinkle.
yeah, he was a singer. I think he was a tenor, and I could be completely mistaken, but he taught our music history course, and I'll never forget. Sporadically through the semester, he would stop us and say, "Kids, are you having fun?" And like he just like check in, no matter what the lesson is. He'd like break the fourth wall or whatever his teacher, and he's just like, "Are you having fun? You should be having fun." And I don't know why, but that stuck with me over all these years of just no matter where you are in your studies, like, are you enjoying this?
Yeah, but that's so important.
Yeah, and I laughed at the time because I thought it was kind of odd, but it really resonated with me. Most influential professors, my theory professor, Eileen Soskin, helped me understand theory, and I wasn't no longer afraid of it in undergrad. And I've had some professors kick my butt that just did not take mediocrity.
Squirm away. Yeah.
Yeah, they saw a value in me more so than I might have. They saw that I was capable of doing greater things and being bigger than what I thought I was. And I really appreciate them pushing me and holding me accountable. Well, I haven't thought about that though. It's you think about your initial applied lesson teachers because you spend so much time with them. But I had some really, really supportive characters along the way that made me into the musician I am now, and I'm really thankful for that.
Okay,
I gotta reach out to them. I gotta send them a note.
Yeah. Yes, everyone thank your teachers because
thank your teachers.
Yeah. Most inspired musical hero of any genre?
Wow. My relationship with music, in that I haven't listened to as much music as I normally would recently. I've been playing and making music and teaching it, but just the days of where I would listen and like put on music to do it, not as much. But when I do, I love Outkast.
Oh.
And I will put one of their albums, AT Aliens or Aquemini, or I think if I had like a desert island, I would hang out with Andre 3000 and Big Boy.
Wow.
Like we would be buds. If I was going to say something more in the classical realm, Mahler would be, I think he wouldn't be a fun hang, but that's not the question. I think favorite would be, I think it's Mahler,
Okay,
it still is.
All the symphonies.
Just the complexity, the orchestration, the complexity, the turmoil. His beauty's in his orchestration, I think.
Yes.
It's just so deep. And then you read some composers and play some music of other composers, and it's nowhere near the level of detail of what you hear with each section and where you hear the colors and timbres. And I think that not many composers really nailed that.
Tap into that,
Yeah. So Mahler.
Makes me I should listen to Mahler again.
Right. Well, I definitely burned out on Mahler too. So I think I didn't listen to Mahler for a couple years because, I think you can overdo it.
That happens to us as classical musicians. You get burnt out listening to concerts, but we just need time to put it to bed and then we can revisit it later. It's not like it's over. Yeah.
That's how I actually got on the Beethoven train. I did not like Beethoven, and I did not like Mozart as much. I just, I think there was a little bit of angst as a trombone player. I was like, why did you guys include me more?
Tuba Mirum? No?
Tuba Mirum, right. We were there, Beethoven, Symphony 5, we were around. But as I got older as a musician, as I got more experience and listened to more Beethoven, I just realized how much of a baller he was. He's just a genius, and really thoughtful, romantic music that was being made that was so complex, and it was presented in its purest, simplest way. But it would evoke all of these complex emotions and deep thought in listening to it that I'm like, whoa, okay, let me listen to this again. Let me check this out again,
Yeah, I guess from a perspective of a string player and a cellist, we can play most anybody, most any composer because they wrote for us in some way. So I've never had the perspective of thinking about a Beethoven or Mozart in this way of, I wonder what it's like to not be able to play that music. So I feel for you.
Yeah, I don't get as excited as everybody does about a Baroque symphony.
Right.
It's cool. It's cool, but I don't get the same as like Mahler's Third or a Strauss tone poem.
Whereas we freak out when it's Strauss tone poems.
Right. Also vice versa though. You're looking at like Bruckner and you're playing tremolos for 2 hours, but it's that's not Bruckner. Bruckner's music is great as well.
I know. I'm one of those weird string players. I love playing the tremolo.
It feels good to hear because I just have this conception that a lot of string players hate it.
But that is true. They do hate it. I'm just one of the weird ones because I like thinking that I'm contributing to the contained excitement that is Bruckner in doing the tremolos. So I feel like my purpose is being served. And also I don't have to be on charge the whole time. I can kind of relax and fluff it out whenever I need to. So
live the life of the back row, you mean?
Yeah.
You're usually doing the heavy lifting, and we're the supporters in the back row in the orchestra. We're just, especially in the trombone section, I believe that the trombone is 80% supportive and 20% we come out of the context and we're in the foreground.
Yeah.
But the 80% is like, we're supporting the group in that. And so it's nice to, little role reversal.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. No, I seriously enjoy those moments. I just listen and I'm like, I'm in orchestra. This is amazing. What sounds I'm hearing. Yeah. Well, anyway, I mean, we took a little bit of a side turn, but
it's awesome.
Okay.
I love it.
Most transformative performance experience?
There are two. One is on a more personal note. I set goals with my mom. I told my mom that I was going to take her to Vienna and she's going to see me play in the music program at some point in my life, and that she's going to see me do that, and that she's going to also see me perform with some of the world's best in Carnegie Hall. And and so she did that. I did a performance of Mahler 9 in Carnegie Hall with Cleveland several moons ago, and I was really fortunate to have her join me. And it wasn't just the performance. That was incredible, but the fact that my mom and my family were in the audience in this historic hall at this time, I felt validated for everything I've been doing.
Well, full
it
circle,
even gets me now.
Well, it's getting me. I mean,
and this smile is seeing her after the performance coming out the stage door and just seeing her, this joy. You can't describe how much pride was on her face.
Yeah. That's so sweet, though. I mean, that you made that promise to her and then you fulfilled it. Yeah.
What's crazy is that we were going to fulfill the Vienna one this past year, but COVID.
No, COVID, damn it. I mean,
darn it, COVID. They canceled a tour to Austria. That was going to be it.
Well, you're going to do it again, though. I mean, right?
It's going to happen again. It's going to happen. Yeah. I'm not worried. But the other, there's another performance that comes to mind on a career highlight, was performing in front of 300,000 people at once, a part of the Indianapolis 500. And I've been doing that with my band Beauty Slap. We've been playing that, maybe this was our second or third year being a part of that festival and that event. And for those who don't know, the Indy 500 is the largest sporting event in the world, period. The Super Bowl might draw millions of viewers, but the Indy 500 is like, there are 300 to 400,000 people at the track right there, and it is massive.
That's wild. That's awesome.
Yeah, it was one of the most exhilarating, exciting moments. They built a stage. They, being the production company at Indianapolis Motor Speedway, built a stage for my band to play pre-race, and so they drove us around the track, and we were on these, large flat beds with the revolving stage, and I'm playing the Ride of the Valkyries as the joke, just over the side of the side of the track, just like, how many people can do this right now? Just me. And there were two sounds that I will never forget. One, the sound of the roaring crowd when they truly are like behind you. You see it in movies and TV and you hear about it, you read about it, but to actually be there and to feel that energy and that love from the audience, you're like, whoa. It's so empowering. You're like, I can do anything.
That's how rock stars get that attitude, I guess.
I think so. Like, I'm getting energy right now just thinking about it. And the other sound is the starting of the engines. When they first turn their engines on and you're on the track and you hear it and you feel it, and it is
electric.
I want everyone to experience that. Yeah. You don't have to like racing or understand it, but you will love that moment.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So those are two moments that really stick out, just to be able to play in front of that many people and to play in such a prestigious hall.
Wow. Next piece you'd like to learn?
It's several. I want to put on a recital soon. Yeah. And with all that's going on, I find that even though we're not performing as much, I still find myself just as busy, if not busier, in terms of scheduling and just keeping everything moving. So I want to really learn a complete cello suite.
Bach,
I want to approach it.
Yes.
Yes, from Bach. It can be done poorly, and it's done poorly a lot. Not to say that you shouldn't do it, but I want to approach it from a wiser approach than, say, a brass player would normally approach that.
With cellistic mindset?
With a more, I want to say with the mindset of even a wind player, just the sense of phrasing and pacing that I think that we can connect with as brass players, but I think our physical limitations really prohibit us from doing, we have to breathe at some point. And I think because of that, when we're learning Bach, it shapes bad habits in brass players because you have to breathe. So you end up ignoring some beautiful moment that could have been such a powerful line or a few notes because, you had to, gasping for air after a, 8-bar phrase. It's so nice playing a string instrument. You don't have to breathe.
Yeah, I know.
I'm over here just airing my grievances.
No, it's okay. Well, call me up if you ever need any advice.
Yeah, it's between that and a Chopin nocturne, like the left hand. There's one, the numbers are blank right now, but it's bass dominant nocturne. It sounds gorgeous. And I think that it would sound really nice on trombone.
Nice.
So
okay.
That's where I'm thinking. I'm beyond where, people have written trombone rep. I'm trying to play other people's stuff.
That's okay. I'm totally happy with people taking cello repertoire, for instance. So yeah, go for it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
You made it through the Spitfire questions. Congratulations.
I totally deconstructed the Spitfire towards the back end.
No, oh my God, you're totally fine. No, this is always what happens. And that's why I'm like, well, are they really Spitfire or are they more, Ember fire questions?
5 seconds to answer or else.
No. Okay, Hakeem, can you walk me through your musical origin story? How did you...
Sure.
Oh,
no, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
How did you get into music as a young child? When did you decide to become a professional? And walk me through the steps of your career until where you are today.
Thank you for asking that. I can say now that I am in a musical family, but when I started, I wasn't. It was really just me. My dad and my mom were both, they loved to listen to music, and my mom has a beautiful singing voice, but didn't study. And so I was the first to really study it in that way, Western classical music. But I have a brother who's also a musician and in a lot of ways better than me, but I grew up listening to whatever my dad was listening to. And my dad is from Libya, and so he's from Northern Africa and listens to worldly music. And my mother is black. She's from Washington, D.C. And so I had this eclectic experience growing up, listening to so much music and just spending time with my dad, at our stereo, sitting at his feet, listening to Deutsche Grammophon CDs, compilation CDs of Karajan classics or just Berlin classics or Vienna. And I always knew the gold label. I knew that gold label and the triple D mark in the back of the recordings before I knew composers or specific orchestras. I knew of the Deutsche Grammophon label. So I had this affinity for listening to this label with my dad. And it wasn't until I was in high school playing in a youth orchestra where I was able to play one of the pieces that I listened to as a child and put 2 and 2 together, whoa, this is Bach's Little Fugue in G minor. And I listened to this with my dad, and I'm on the stage playing side by side with the NSO, as a young artist in high school, and I auditioned for this program, and whoa, and that's how I knew. I was like, whoa, this is incredible. Yeah. I know this piece. I know this.
Yeah.
And that got me so excited about music and just that feeling, and I've connected with that. And I decided when I was in high school that I was going to be a musician and that I was going to follow that. And so before that, taking a step back, I started playing trombone in the 3rd grade. I went to an arts magnet school right outside of DC in Prince George's County, Maryland, and I was really fortunate for that education because they put a trombone in my hand in 3rd grade.
Right.
I had a choice to choose from instruments, and I saw this whole room, and I was this short kid, and I saw flutes, and I saw clarinets and saxophones. I'm like, no. And I see this thing that's on a trombone stand, and it's tall, and I'm looking up at it, and I'm like, what's that? And teacher's like, that's a trombone. I was like, yeah, I want to play that one. And my arms were so short, I couldn't reach 7th position. And in a lot of ways, I still can't because but you learn to deal with
little tricks.
Yeah. Flick that wrist. So I wanted to champion. I wanted to climb this mountain of trombone when I was younger, and I started playing in band in 3rd grade, which was huge. I didn't take it seriously until about maybe 8th grade, until I heard this high school band, which ended up being the high school I would attend. I heard them performing. They came and did a concert tour at my middle school at the time, and I'm like, whoa, kind of similar to the experience I had in high school on stage of the orchestra. I was like, I didn't know that these sounds were possible. This is cool. Yeah. I want to go to this school. I want to do that. And my family was so supportive. They did not know the ins and outs. They knew okay, we'll take you here on the weekends and you're going to play in this orchestra and you're going to do this and we'll take you over here. We don't know how it works, but we'll get you there.
Yeah.
You
seem like you're having fun. So we're going to ride that wave with you. Yeah.
And so they learned how to be, music band parents, where I was learning how to play my instrument at a higher level. And so in high school, I began taking some private lessons, and I was really fortunate to go to this really outstanding school for music. Catholic school, DeMatha Catholic in Maryland. Some people might know it because it's a really popular sports school that they kick out a lot of superstars, athletes, but they also have a world-class band program and orchestra program. I was fortunate to be a part of that, and private lessons and having the opportunity to work with the National Symphony in high school and sit side by side with the members. And this is, a lot of symphony orchestras do this now. They have these side by side concerts. And I'm glad they do, because that's what got me into music. They were putting gas in the tank.
Yeah.
But like, you started the engine
Yeah.
on stage that day. Ever since then, it was Shostakovich 5 and Bach's Little Fugue in G minor. Okay.
We're doing this for
do
life.
this. And I made a promise to myself that I don't know how I'm going to fit in this world. I would love to play in an orchestra. I didn't see a lot of people my color. I didn't see a lot of black people. And I still don't. That's a separate conversation.
Yeah.
And I didn't see a lot of representation in the field. So I was energized to change that and to be present. And so that's kind of what got me down this, I want to go to the conservatory route. So I went to Peabody from that, right up the road, DC to Baltimore, not too far, kind of still close to home, but I was getting a world-class education, studying intensely. And from there, I made the choice in choosing a grad school, not based on the prestigious program or the orchestra, but the teacher, and specifically a teacher that's won a job in the last 3 years. I wanted to study with somebody who was fresh off the circuit in that way.
Yeah.
And so I chose to study with someone in Lincoln Center who was playing in the Metropolitan Opera. Took lessons with him for many years and furthered my education there. And then from New York, I moved to Texas, where I took an assistantship in Fort Worth, Texas at Texas Christian University. And I have nothing but fond memories of my time in Texas, but I was there for a brief time because I was then invited to come to Pittsburgh and join my undergraduate bandmates in their brass quintet, C Street Brass, which was in residence at Carnegie Mellon University at the time. And so that cut my master's career in Texas, my assistantship career, short. But while I was down there, I was eating a ton of food, and I was just in that practice room.
Yes.
I mean, I gained, I'm pretty sure I was there for less than 7 or 8 months, and I gained, I'm pretty sure 10, 15 pounds. Just the barbecue. I had a handlebar mustache, and I gained so much weight. I was a different person.
I relate. I mean, I lived in Houston. There's not much you can do other than enjoy the food and beer around. I mean, there's some things you can go to museums and stuff, but it's a swamp, or whatever. In Fort Worth, it's pretty flat. There's not many mountains around, so
yeah, you're not going up hills. You're not burning calories walking up and down hills like you are in Pittsburgh.
No.
So I moved to Pittsburgh with my band that was in residence. And so I immediately was taken from a position where I was a student teacher to being a teacher student, where I was in residence. I was teaching chamber music. I was representing the school. They were taking us on tours all over the country. And then from that, I auditioned for the River City Brass Band, which opened up shortly after I arrived in Pittsburgh. I was so fortunate to take part of, because brass band playing in a lot of ways is the opposite of playing in an orchestra. In the back row, you might play, just for a few minutes on a concert program, or you might play in certain sections, the climax or the really subtle moments of a symphony or a tone poem. Whereas in a brass band, you have to play the parts of the string. You play all the parts. And so your horns are in your face a lot.
Yeah.
And that gained a lot of endurance and stamina. And I ended up becoming a stronger brass player because of it, So I was really fortunate of that experience of just getting used to playing 2-hour shows at incredible volumes.
Yeah.
If you can imagine a brass ensemble, 30-piece British brass band at their loudest.
Oh boy. Buckle up, right?
Yeah. And we're in Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh, I want to say, internationally has gained this notoriety of being this really exciting brass town where you listen to recordings of the orchestra and of bands. You get this Pittsburgh power. And so there was this pride in how this band played. And you it taught me, I had to put on my big boy pants really soon,
Yeah.
So I was in the River City Brass Band, and I was studying with members of the Pittsburgh Symphony. And then that's how the freelancing, in addition to having my chamber ensemble and this brass band, freelancing started to take off. And I started to get called to play in orchestras all across the country, which was really, really cool. Starting with Baltimore Symphony, where I was in school as an undergraduate, to the Atlanta Symphony and Alabama, and all over. I'm seeing myself wow, this is exciting. I'm seeing that you
have a place. As you were saying earlier, you weren't sure where your place was, but you're.
Yeah, and I knew that I was onto something. It might not have been in its final form, but I think that I was building this reputation of being a dependable musician, you can call, and orchestras needed that. that. Sometimes I think I got my start. The first time I played in the Pittsburgh Symphony, I think I had a couple hours notice. I had a text message. My teacher, who passed away, he was getting sick and he had to call out last minute and they needed someone to fill. And I remember getting a call saying, hey, can you come down to the hall? Can you come down to the hall, play this rehearsal actually? And I'm like, sure. When is it? It's like next week? And he's like, no, it's like right now. I'm like, yes. And like in my mind, there's a split second of this is that call that you were waiting for.
Right.
And so what are you going to do? And I said, okay, I'll be there in 10.
Yeah.
I didn't have a car. And so I hopped on the bus in Pittsburgh where I lived up near the university downtown and got down to the hall and showed up and I didn't step any holes.
That's
as a first time freelancer, you're like, okay,
yeah.
All right, don't make
count.
Count. Don't be confident, but also count. And then when in doubt, leave it out. Right. So I had this mindset of like, man, if I don't want to step in a hole. So it went well. It was fun. And to sit, they were so welcoming and warm to have me come in last minute. Everybody was so supportive. And this whole stigma of the people in the orchestra are mean and like it's a tumultuous environment. For me at the time, that wasn't true. Everybody was so loving and like, hey, thanks for being here, have a good time.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay. And I did. And now here we are.
Well, you're in Utah right now.
I'm in a hotel room in Utah talking to you.
Yeah. You're living a lot of people's dream in the sense that you're not really tied down to one orchestra, but that you're able to mix and match wherever you go.
Yeah. It has provided an incredible perspective playing with so many great organizations and everyone is different. It's like regional dialects. Every orchestra has a little something that is so special that makes
you can tap into every time you go and check out.
Yeah. And the more I found myself going around playing in these orchestras and picking up on the subtle nuances of their sound, I'm able to realize and recognize, and I'm hearing things differently. I'm like, whoa, this is a cool group. This is special. Like these winds sound incredible. Or like, the high brass or the low brass, or, I am really fortunate for my experiences. I'm really, really fortunate to have the experiences that I do have and continue to have.
Yeah. So when I was listing kind of your introduction, part of my question is, how do you do everything? How are you a part of Beauty Slap and New Deco and also, a professor of trombone at West Virginia University? How do you juggle all of that?
Yeah. Well, the teaching part is more so the full-time job. And especially now, I have a wonderful studio. I have a full studio. It's getting big too. So that's a lot of hours in teaching and preparation and instruction. I have to be good at scheduling. One of my favorite Congresswoman, Maxine Waters, says, I have to reclaim my time. I have to really plan out what I'm doing, especially when I'm doing a bunch of things, and I have to look at it in front of me. And really, I have to say no a lot as well. And I find that at first that was so hard to say no to a gig, but that we all have limits. We can't do everything, and there's a balance. And we also make time for the things that we want, though. So
that's also true. Well, thank you then for taking some time with me today.
Oh, for sure. I love this. I love talking. I think that this is such a wonderful thing to have and for people to listen to and to connect with. We need more of you in the world. So thank you. You keep going along.
Okay. Did you want to mention anything about the other ensembles that you were a part of?
Yeah. So in the pandemic, Beauty Slap, my funk is kind of underselling it because we're more than just that. It's people have a hard time categorizing our music, and we do too. It's music that we love to play. It's music that is.
Does it need to be put in a box?
No, it doesn't.
See, right?
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
You're on board. For instance, like in Pittsburgh, we won this award, Best Jazz Band in 2017. And we're like, we're not a jazz band. Though, and some other things will get nominated for like Best EDM Group. So wherever you want to place us, that's fine. We just like to make music that we think people will enjoy and that we enjoy.
Yeah.
And in the pandemic, we haven't been able to get together, although we live in the same city. So we've gone online. We've embraced this remote culture and we've made it a reality. And so we've brought in our fans and subscribers into our lives, into our daily lives even. So we'll start streaming on Twitch and building up a presence and releasing podcasts and, releasing new music all remotely. We all have high-end interfaces and microphones. And so we can create music from our digital audio workstations and send it to our producer, who then we all just make magic together. And so it's reinvented our creative process in a lot of ways. But that was because we had to find a way to stay relevant in today's society and to keep making music. So really fortunate that Beauty Slap is still doing stuff, and you can check that out. The Plain Podcast, Plain Media, beautyslap.com. Also, there's River City Brass Band doing some concerts, starting to get back into recording concerts for our subscribers and releasing that in terms of digital subscriptions. What else is there? I'm like, what else do I do?
New Deco?
So New Deco has been actually having some concerts, but I haven't been able to join. They've been smaller concerts. They haven't had a full trombone section. I play bass trombone with them as well. And trombone player in my group, Gabriel, who plays in C Street Brass and in Beauty Slap with me, also plays in New Deco. There are three of us that kind of do a lot of things together. So we have this camaraderie and we're this unit when we play. It's nice. So he's been down there. They're doing some educational stuff. And so it's good to see that all of the organizations that I'm a part of are active and still finding ways to continue to just be present and visible and contributing to our community.
But even as a brass player, I mean, it's been so hard on everyone, but for wind and brass players, I can't imagine what I keep saying. I feel like I keep saying this on all my episodes, but I seriously can't imagine what that must have felt like the moment everything went on shutdown, lockdown. It was like as if your career just ended until the foreseeable future, which is now like, okay, like you made it work, you're making it work. And that's incredible.
True that.
Yeah. Okay, well, is this a good time to take a break?
Sure.
Okay, we'll be right back. Welcome back from the break. So in deciding what to discuss in your outside interest, you were telling me that you were once a mixologist at a bar in New York City? Was that right?
Yeah, I was formally trained as a bartender in Baltimore, and then I worked for a company, and I transferred with the company to New York when I went to grad school in New York, and it was, I think, one of the smartest decisions I made, not really thinking about it, but I was placed in a position where I had a job in New York, which is a coveted spot for bartenders to work, and I found myself heading a beverage program at a hotel on Park Avenue.
What?
Yeah.
Dang.
And I was fortunate to have had the formal training. And so I opened a restaurant in Baltimore, a part of the Kimpton Hotels. The restaurant that was associated with the hotel was just this fine dining establishment. And while in school at Peabody, I had friends in the city who were, like I frequented bars. I loved the social aspect of hanging out, kind of like Cheers. For those who are listening who don't know what Cheers is, Cheers was the show about a bar.
No, totally.
I was enamored by that social aspect of just getting to know people. And sometimes you would see him again, sometimes you wouldn't. Even the notion of having a regular, and what that meant. And I started out being a regular at this bar in Baltimore, and from that they offered me a job. They were like, "Hey, do you want to come work with us? Like, we're opening this new restaurant. Like, you seem to love it. And if you want to get into this, I would suggest reading these couple books, learn a couple recipes, these basics, and then come join us, and we'll do a group training, in a couple months." And so I did this. I took this opportunity in the summer of my junior year, and I trained for about a month and a half, 2 months with this company and its corporation. And they had us going through everything from, we were taking classes with a master sommelier. We were being taught by the head chef, how to cut fruit, how to prepare, how to handle food, just the ins and outs of fine dining, how to serve, how to present, how to speak to guests. In the bar aspect, I learned about mixology. And this was in 2008, roughly 2009 maybe, and I was I want to say at the height of this mixology movement of craft cocktails, and you start seeing these bars pop up that really focus on craft cocktails, which is nice. And so I learned a lot about the delicate balance of making a good cocktail and making a bad cocktail. Also learning what a cocktail is, and its origins and what the history is. And essentially it's something that was, it originally started out in a cocktail glass, which was known as a Collins glass now. Anything served in that glass was called a cocktail. And usually it started out being a spirit with one mixer. And nowadays, when we think about cocktails, we're thinking about martinis, and we're thinking about all these elaborate drinks and shots and shakers and all this stuff. And so I think that alcohol has gone on such a tremendous journey throughout the course of our history as people.
Yeah.
And there's some similarities to music, and especially being an effective artist behind the bar. Sometimes you're creating drinks that don't have a specific recipe or that didn't exist before, but that are, combinations of flavor profiles and timbres, colors that you can like create this little masterpiece and give it to someone. And you're like, here you go. And they're like, oh my God, this is unique and special, much like music.
Right.
So I think that my training in the bar helped my musicianship in so many ways. And I didn't even know this.
It was all subtle.
It was some things were subtle. Some things were overt, like just talking to people.
Oh, sure.
There's so many musicians, you can imagine, right? There's so many musicians that don't.
Yes,
Go ahead.
that's what I was going to say. I'm sorry to interrupt. I got excited. This is going to sound so bizarre, but I wish that there was some kind of class for musicians to learn how to talk to their patrons and learn how to talk to their audience.
This is what we're doing.
Well, I mean, fair enough, but we never talk about that. And so basically you're getting a crash course in being social.
People.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're so right. There are more people who have spent so much time perfecting their craft, and whether it's be in the practice room or just performing, that they don't think about selling their craft, and that we are we're entrepreneurs. We have to sell it. We have to be able to advocate for it and speak clear and coherent and concise thoughts, right. Unlike what I've been saying for most of this interview.
No. You're doing great.
No, so as you can tell, I'm kind of an extroverted person, but I actually don't always consider myself that. But I lived this alternate personality kind of behind the bar. I felt like I could ask questions and be a character.
Yeah.
I could go into character behind the bar. And it's so similar to when you're a performer, how we have to invoke the muse, whatever muse that may be, as performing and acting, on stage and selling and being a part of that. I had practice for years talking to people, and because it was directly related to my well-being and getting tips, I had to get good at it. I had to be an effective communicator. And so eye contact, things like looking at people in their eyes when you're talking to, and when you're listening, like little subtle things that you don't, like what you're saying, that course needs to be taught, not just in music schools, I think in every school.
Oh, I mean, fair enough. Yeah.
Some business schools might talk about this, or other public speaking professions, but you're right. I think that we've let that go by the wayside, just the personality behind the music, because someone's going to write that check, not always, but someone can write the check, and it's the relationship that you build that will help open doors down the road.
It all comes down to that, frankly. I mean, you can be the best, most clean musical, but people don't want to invest in people that they don't know.
Yeah.
So that's, it's
or
like,
can't
why
relate
don't
with.
Yeah. Anyway, you can continue.
It's right though. I was fortunate to see that, and it wasn't a game or anything to me. It was truly fascinating, just learning how to communicate and talk to people, and the fact that being behind the bar, people wanted something from you, that there was just this level of respect at all times that I might not have always been given had I not been a bartender. So I thought that it was a very neutral situation where I could see this scene in front of me.
I've definitely been that person traveling and have no one to talk to. So I would go to a bar and sit there and strike up a conversation with bartender. And there is sort of a level of comfort to be able to talk to a quote unquote stranger, but also be in the comfort of an establishment, knowing that this person's taking care of you. They've probably gone through similar experiences or whatnot. And that relationship, again, the dialogue between
human. Yeah. We're humans, and tapping into human nature and the human experience, and just listening and, like you said, talking. I would have loved to talk to someone like you at the bar, and who's coming in, and it started out with one-on-one conversations with individual patrons. And I'm remembering specific people from my time when I was working in New York that were in the neighborhood that would come in. The moment I would see them walk through the door, I knew their order. I'd start making it. Or if I saw, a meeting happening, I knew that always, or someone who was coming in, you would start to see things before they were happening, and reading their minds and reading into their tendencies of the people that were coming, that were regulars. So you could kind of make them feel more comfortable, and they would give you a better tip, and they would only want to work with you and only want to be.
They trusted you. You built a trust with them. Yeah, totally. No, that also kind of reminds me a little bit of music in a way, is that you have to know one step ahead before you play it. By knowing your patrons so well, and you could already have one step ahead and give them that extra level of comfort and overall service, really, I suppose.
Yes, there's no greater feeling than when someone comes to sit down at the bar. You hand them the drink. As soon as they sit down, you're like, here you go. Good to see you. How was your day?
Yeah.
They didn't have to say anything. That's a level of trust, and it's beautiful.
Yeah.
On the flip side, you see bad people as well. And you learn to read who they are, and you learn to spot them too. Like people who are either inconsiderate or rude, or it might not be bad people, but are not necessarily the talkative type. You kind of read the room, and you read off people's body language and their social cues. If they're open to being talked to, or if they're not, if they are uncomfortable, you can pivot so many different directions based off of the information that you see from the person walking in the door. So when they get to the door to when they sit down somewhere, you can kind of pick up a lot on what they're doing and what they're going through.
How their day was or something like that.
How their day was. Yeah. Just in their walk. And those are things that I've noticed over a while, like, wow, okay. And so now how do you relate that with music? I mean, yeah.
Who do you hire? No, I'm just kidding.
Well, it's hard to put into words, but you see it. You begin to recognize patterns. Energy is a big thing. I believe that we all give out energy. That's nonverbal. That is, like the aura. And when we are introduced into a new place and, when you're not able to use your words and people can see you, they also see this aura. They see this energy and they can feel it. And I think I'm able to pick up on that from certain people, and especially behind the bar. At least I think I am. I don't know. I could just be completely full of myself right now.
No.
But
no, I think you've earned your stripes. Being a bartender, being a musician. Yeah.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that time. I enjoyed tying it all together, creativity, right? I enjoyed the creative aspect of talking to someone, and then based off how our conversation's going, this is not even talking about like what they're drinking, making them a drink, because they didn't know what they wanted, but listening to them talk about anything. There were rules at the bar. There were definitely rules. Like I tried to enforce a no religion, no politics type of conversation, but I think nowadays we can talk about that. We need to be having some conversations, but within reason. But you'd be surprised with how much stuff you can cover and how much you can get to know about somebody just by listening.
Yeah.
So
I know. I mean, we're both podcasters, right? So
yeah. Asking the right question, that's how I learned to first ask leading questions to where I might not even know the answer, but questions that would stimulate
a surprising
conversation.
Response. Yeah, or that too. Yeah. So can I ask you a few questions now with that in mind?
Please do.
Okay. So were you at a point in your mixology where if someone walked in and said, I want a pink, bubbly, and floral drink, you knew exactly what to make them?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, I love those kind of bartenders because and I guess a spin-off question from that is, what were your favorite drinks to make for people, or just did it matter, or did you have a favorite? What is your favorite? All these, just some standard questions.
Yes, I love this question, and where this all starts. First, it starts with having a balanced cocktail. Every cocktail, whether it's something sour, something sweet, something spicy, something smoky, it has to be balanced. It has to have that citrus or sweet. It has to have that savory. It just has to have it. And if it doesn't, it's not going to be palatable. And so the first things you learn as a bartender are your ratios. When you're making, we'll say like a cocktail that has a spirit and 2 mixers, there are ratios you want to abide by. And that's usually like 2 ounces to 2.5 ounces of spirit to maybe a 1/2 ounce or 3/4 of an ounce of some kind of citrus, equal amounts, if not a little more, of something savory or sweet, whether it is a syrup or a mixer or a cordial. A cordial's like Campari or like elderflower syrup, like Saint Germain or
chartreuse,
green chartreuse, yellow chartreuse. Yeah, exact. Galliano. Well, Galliano, I know a lot of people just drink Galliano straight, and I can't get on board with that. But it's maybe it'll change as I get, as I continue to progress in the world. So you learn these rules of crafting a balanced cocktail, and then from that you can substitute and play with flavor profiles. So when you're asking someone what flavors they like, most people tell you they'll pigeonhole themselves into a specific cocktail. You have a running list of maybe 10 different recipes that you can make on the spot, that you can vary in a little way to make a unique cocktail, and based off what they say, you can kind of pick one of those 10 recipes and then vary it from there.
With it. Yeah.
What are you saying?
Futz with it is what I said.
Yeah, futz with it. Yeah. Yeah. So the easiest spirit to work with is vodka. Yeah. Because it doesn't have much of taste, and it can take the profile of the mixers. It can really, enhance them. So the default spirit when people are like, make me something that's, fruity, make me something that is anything really, you want to start with vodka because it's the most neutral, and that whatever you add to it, the vodka is not going to detract. It's not going to fight that flavor. You can also use gin and tequila. When you do that, you want to play into those flavors. So the tannins and the floralness of gin, you want to pair that with some kind of herb or with some kind of floral syrup. So I know whenever someone says, I like gin, my mind immediately goes to lavender, goes to thyme, and it goes to some form of simple syrup with maybe fresh squeezed lemon or grapefruit. And any mixture of stuff like that will begin to create this balanced gin cocktail. So a story, and obviously there's some people who, like yourself, you say, I like to pick the brain of a bartender and say, hey, make me something like this and this.
Yeah.
There are people who are on the opposite end of the spectrum who are not fun to work with, who come into the bar, they say, like, I want a Facebook. Make me a Facebook shot,
or make me a Facebook shot.
And I admit, I don't know. There are so many drinks out there nowadays, especially that no bartender is going to know every single recipe.
Oh, so they're just trying to be, I see. They're trying to like stump you or something. Oh, yeah. What? No.
Right. And so you're like, make me a Facebook. And so as a bartender, I've learned, little ways to ask for more information without coming across as being incompetent. It's like, well, I'm not familiar with that one. What is the, I think it's a base of this. What are some of the other flavors you taste in the Facebook? I would ask a follow-up question, but then, depending on the customer, they would just, all they want is just a blue drink. I want a blue drink, basically. And so I would say, okay.
Curacao, there you go.
Blue Curacao, or if you wanted to be really creative, you could triple sec green chartreuse and like a couple of it to give that blue, create a natural bluish tint that's not quite as piercing, aqua as the blue Curacao. I think it looks like it's just such a blue if you've ever seen it.
Well, it also just reminds me of some really, really unfortunate evenings.
Yes. People usually equate, those, it's really sugary.
Yeah.
They equate those to rough nights, rough mornings the next day.
Yes. When I've been at bars and there's times I wanted to ask for an aviation and they didn't really know what an aviation was and they had to look it up.
Gin-based cocktail. Yeah. It's an old cocktail. See, that's one that's kind of rusty on me. I know it's a gin base though.
It has creme de violet and it has maraschino liqueur in it, and it's gin and lemon juice with then you garnish it with a cherry. I just recently made it for actually Gabrielle's bachelorette party, but
Yeah.
But for instance, I'd walk in and I'd say, oh, can I have an aviation? And then they'd be like, oh, I'm not okay. And then they go on their phone and check it out. I'm totally okay that they do that. You know what I mean?
Okay. Yeah. And I appreciate that.
You can't possibly remember all the cocktails. So anyway, if anyone's out there, well, I mean, we're not going in bars right now, but give some leniency for the bartenders these days is all I'm saying.
Yeah. And on the flip side, I do believe that there are cocktails that every bartender should know and that you should at least be prepared to make. The Martini is one. And the different variances of Martini. When someone specifies a gin Martini versus a vodka Martini, know that they are made differently. A vodka Martini is more, I want to say, popular nowadays. That's 3 ounces of liquor, 3 ounces of a spirit. You typically don't use dry vermouth as much, but you shake it violently. You get the ice chunks. The vodka becomes a little cloudy, but it settles. And the ice chips, it's basically like a glorified vodka shot. And you can put in olives or whatever. And if you wanted to have a hint of vermouth, you would do that. Whereas for a gin martini, the vermouth is an integral part. I want to say it's a half ounce in some recipes of dry vermouth, and it's usually something really super dry, like Dolan or Martini Rossi is like the brand everybody has on their shelves.
Don't. That's crap, right? I mean, I hate that.
There are great vermouths out there, but I mean, in a pinch, it works. It has gin. It has 2.5 ounces of gin. It has half ounce of dry vermouth. It has a lemon twist, and it's stirred. You do not shake gin, right? So you can shake it, but unless you intend to do it, it bruises the gin. Same thing with bourbons. And so when you ask for a specific martini and the bartender's like, oh, you want a martini? And they give you a gin martini that is 3 ounces of gin with no vermouth, and they just shake it, run.
Yeah.
Run away from that bar. There are little subtle cues that you can figure out if they know what they're doing or not. Another one is the old fashioned. And this is one that I think there are 2 known recipes. There's a more common recipe that everyone associates with the maraschino cherry and the orange that's muddled. But the original old fashioned recipe is actually, it's a beautiful cocktail. It's something that I usually order at bars when I would go out. It's not the muddled cherry and orange with simple syrup poured with whiskey and ice over top with club soda sometimes. That's not an old fashioned. An old fashioned is more of it's a stiffer drink. It has bitters, sugar cube, an orange peel, and rye or bourbon. So 2 ounces of rye, a couple dashes of Angostura bitters, and then 1 sugar cube that's dissolved. And that's muddled with the bitters. The fruit coming into the picture didn't happen until recently.
Yeah.
And so when you order this drink, I like to specify, and I have an old fashioned, like an original old fashioned or one.
A new old fashioned.
Hey, that's not bad.
Well, man, see, this is where I get stuck because I could keep asking you questions about.
Keep asking.
Well, yeah, but we have to talk about video games too.
Also true, right? So I do like to build, and building a cocktail is so satisfying. It's in the moment, and it's for this person or this group of people to help them, right? They're looking to have a good time or whatever it may be. But when I build electronics, I'm building for me, and it is really, really I enjoy it so much. I built my first computer when I was in high school, and
wow.
it was how did I do that? It's a great question. Looking up some early YouTube early videos of how to place a motherboard. And at the time, there were some instructions there, and basically trying to read the instructions and figure it out. But there's a lot of trial and error.
Okay.
The first computer I built was I repurposed my mom and dad's old Gateway computer.
Oh my God.
And I took out the graphics card, put a new graphics card in, reseated the processor, kept the same motherboard, got new memory and all this other stuff, and beefed up the machine. And that was oh, this was fun. And it eventually worked. When you push the button and the power comes on, you're like, whoa, that's cool. Mm-hmm. And it's not soldering parts together and, I got the mask going and got the flames going everywhere. I'm not doing that. But just the amount of care and there's, a lot of things can go wrong. There's a lot of pride in doing that. So it was something that I originally did because I loved video games so much and I wanted to have the edge in playing video games. So I tried to build a computer that would be cheaper than buying one.
Oh, and then you could actually customize it to your speed or whatever your graphics. Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
I'm sorry. When you say video games, do you really mean computer games or do you mean?
I meant computer games. I started out playing computer games. I mean, all video games, to be honest. The love started with Super Nintendo.
Okay.
Started with PlayStation and Super Nintendo and Nintendo 64. These were the systems that I had growing up, that the best Christmases ever, And, once the internet started to really take off, and I think I got DSL, which was the step above 56K, I started to check out some computer games because I thought that there was a lot more. The graphics at the time looked really incredible, and you look at that stuff now, you're like, wow, we've made tremendous strides.
Yeah, totally. Yeah,
it sucked me in, and so I was like, okay, console gaming is great, and I still do it. I still love to do it, but I learned how to use a keyboard and mouse and push the buttons and navigate that at an early age. So yeah, computer games are my love.
So which games are you most versed in?
Great question. So I like to play a few different styles. I play all kinds of games, but the ones that I tend to gravitate to the most are shooters.
Oh, okay.
So action games, usually first person or third person being over the shoulder, where it shows the whole character moving, and first person being where they show if you have a weapon or
it's just the gun there.
Yeah, and GoldenEye is a good example of for Nintendo 64. It's an older game. It's a really good example of a successful first person shooter that was before the internet, before you had a chance to go LAN parties. So I excelled in that, and I played this one game called America's Army, and it was a free game that was actually developed by the Army, and it was used partially as a recruiting tool, but because of that, because the Army had a say in it, they made sure that it was as real as possible. And a lot of video games at the time did not really have that as a trait. Some of them were really gamey, and that you can jump 40 feet in the air or run really, really fast. But in this game, it was you're like a soldier, and you have to go through training and basic and shooting targets and
the
practice. You're limited. You can't do everything. And this is where I started to actually practice playing video games, which was a crazy concept. But I was in a gaming group. They were called clans back in the day, and it's just I cringe every time I even say that, because you just think about the word. But that's what they were. It's big gaming groups, and these are people that I considered really close friends that I had never met, but we spent so much time together, and we would hold practice as a group where we would go through, and in a private server, not with other people, we would rehearse specific techniques and fundamentals to make us better prepared for when we competed. And this was the beginning of like my professional gaming, like it was a short-lived career, but that was the beginning of it. I realized that I had to go attend video game practice. Like we had, and then I didn't at the time put two and two together, but the similarities between what we do in the practice room and like what we do if you're trying to get better at video games, not just play them, but get better at them, they're the same. And I understand that a lot of people play video games. They're not looking to play them at the competitive level, but when you train and when you are focusing on specific movement and the minutia of navigating a game, you have to practice that stuff. You realize you learn the language. Yeah. And so no matter what game you pick up or what game you play, you're like, oh, it's the same mechanics in a way, like it's the same amount of dexterity in the mouse or the movement. I can get the most out of my character, or it's so many little things that you pick up just from doing it over and over. You can really go into detail. I mean, it sounds so absurd, but
no, but I mean, there's whole conventions of video gamers. And I mean, that's where I still am bemused by these conventions that are so hyper competitive with video games and how people can make salaries off of it. But as you're saying, it's very doable and very relatable to the music field of perfecting yourself. I guess it's again, like a different setup with a mouse and keyboard and things, but
practicing a specific skill. You're practicing, focusing on a set of skills, and you're trying to get better, and you're doing the active repetition, and doing that. And
also knowing the rules of each game too, or the little loopholes of each game, and maybe glitches might help or something like that.
Exactly.
Right?
But they're not glitches. It's like you said, it's the rules of the game. And I think that is an important thing to bring out, because every game has a different set of rules to them that you can use to your advantage when you're playing.
Right.
That, some people might not naturally think of. I think that's really interesting and fascinating.
Well, I think that relates with music in a way, because not to say that every composer has a set of rules that they
do,
but there's certain stylistic things that you have to take into consideration with each composer. And then of course, if you even want to bring it all the way to excerpts, there's like a set rule for every, you have to have good intonation, you have to have good rhythm, and then, style and preparing yourself to compete without any nerves or whatever, or how to deal with those emotions. It makes a lot of sense. There's so many comparisons.
You wouldn't play Haydn like you play Bruckner.
Right.
So there are like those unwritten rules that you have to learn. So America's Army was this game that I played, and I was in high school, and I ended up building a computer and competing in this game for a couple years. And I eventually won some money with one of my groups. It's not like I won the salaries like what these guys, these people are making millions of dollars a year. Mm-hmm. You're talking about a streaming community that is rivaling, if not greater than, the amount of cable subscriptions that are out there at any time. Whoever's watching TV, people are getting hundreds of thousands of viewers on stream right now. Mm-hmm. Someone's just like streaming right now and has like 200 to 500,000 people watching them.
Right.
And there's a disconnect in the society where people are like, how can you just watch someone play video games, right? Mm-hmm. In the same sentence, the other group is saying, how can you watch people play football? Right. Or how can you watch people, in a sitcom? Like it's the same. You're watching some form of entertainment. And I'm really happy to see it take off in the way it's gone. Mm-hmm. But I'm also glad that I'm not in it, because the amount of time that it takes to be at the top, it would have interrupted all of the music. I had to make sacrifices in school. I had to not play video games for a couple of years because I needed to practice.
Right. But that actually that brings us back to the pandemic. As I was prepping the introduction, you were saying that, well, I haven't been behind a bar in so long, so maybe we can also talk about video games. And that was a new, renewed joy that you discovered again in the pandemic.
Yes, it is. And it's something that I actually lean into with Beauty Slap. Every week I stream video games from our Twitch account to our subscribers, and just to show a diversity of what we're up to. Okay. We've created this platform where we could be, making music, working out, doing fitness, or critiquing people's music, giving them feedback, or playing video games. Like we're doing all this other stuff. It's like a one-stop shop. And so I've been really happy to get back into it since the pandemic has hit and I've been home. But yeah, it's wild out there.
Yeah.
The level of acumen is high for the top players. And even if you're a casual gamer, you can have a great time and still be a good player. But I think that there's just so many people that are trying to be the Michael Jordan of streaming. I guess you can say the ninja of streaming. If that might be a name that a lot of households might know now. Ninja's a popular streamer
you've just been playing, and that's you've been streaming yourself through Beauty Slap.
Yeah, and it started, I had this aversion to picking up the keyboard and mouse because I associated it with the amount of time that I lost in the practice room from playing these games. And so I would only play console games, console meaning like from a controller,
Yes.
picking up a PlayStation controller and just, jumping in, because I feel like I couldn't get too invested, even though I did. I wouldn't be that committed to it. And I felt like I had some control, but then recently I made that switch back to the keyboard and mouse, and it feels
back home.
Yeah, like riding a bike.
That's actually interesting, because you would think or have maybe potential fear that you would have lost some of that skill, but absolutely not. And do you still play the same games as before?
No, the games that I was playing back in the day, I think they're still out. I mean, there's so many better games out now that look better, and that the mechanics and the graphics just they're at a higher quality. So I play those. I do a lot of Call of Duty now, a lot of Call of Duty Warzone, which is a very popular one.
Yeah.
And recently I've been playing this game called Cyberpunk, which is, it's wild. It is a very graphically intensive game. It gets the most out of your system. So only those with the cutting edge builds can really enjoy this game. And when I say enjoy, I mean like barely enjoy. Because you're running, it's like it's so CPU and graphic intensive and memory intensive that you've got to have a $3,000 PC to be able to run it at its most gorgeous settings. So I do that though.
So did you make a computer for that game?
Oh yeah. My most recent computer that I've built was about 2 years old, and I have given it a revision once. And so I originally built this computer, I want to say almost 10 years ago, and I gave it a facelift 2 years ago. And so I put some of the next generation computer components. Yeah. And a side effect of playing video games is that you're hyper aware of all of the various technologies that are coming out for computers, whether it's a new graphics card or a new computer processor that has cutting edge technology. You're in the know. That's the gaming edge. That's like having an instrument. You have a Stradivarius, or you have an old, in the brass realm, like the old Bach horns, Mount Vernon horns were sought after, right? It's like you have something like that's the holy grail. It can give you a little bit of an edge, and that's important. So my current system, its worth is about, it's like a $3,000, $4,000 system right now. And it's future proof for at least the next year or two. That's the thing, every 6 months, this technology, the new cycle comes out, and like new stuff is always coming out. Wow. So it's up to you to time it right to get the best bang for your buck. You want to get the technology that is the newest, but also that's going to be phased out in a year or two. Yeah. It's hard to navigate that.
Predict sometimes,
Yeah, but you become really good at it. You really do. It's fun. I think it's really fun. And right now, there's a international chip shortage with graphics cards because of the cryptocurrency boom.
Oh, God,
it's really affected a lot of gamers in a negative way, in that these high-end graphics cards that people were using to play video games are being snatched up by crypto miners and scalpers who know that they can get 3 to 4 times of the value of the item if they resell it. So it's been a major shortage of stuff, and I hope that it gets better soon, because it's unfortunate, that it's happening, and it's been happening for 2 years. Pre-pandemic, it's been graphics card shortage, but the prices are going up. These cards, and they're not cheap. We're not talking about like a $50, $60 component. These cards are anywhere between $350 to $1,000, and that's MSRP. So it's a pretty penny.
Yeah.
I love gaming. It has given me a refuge from especially the last year. I've just been able to immerse myself in some games and just turn the switch off. I lead a busy life, and so I think it's very important to balance that with rest and recovery. And I view video games as a form of recovery. So it's fun. It brings me joy.
Yeah, that's all you can ask for these days,
Yes. We need it. Whatever brings you joy nowadays, I think you have to hold on to that and embrace it.
Can I ask you 2 final questions?
Please.
What, in your opinion, is the most common misconception of classical music and the classical music world?
Oh, it's just the uppity is the misconception of the elitist classical. That is my,
I wish your face could have been translatable in podcast land.
I feel like they can see my upper lip is very high. You mentioned this earlier, when you say you play classical music and people have a preconceived notion of what that is already. I think from my experience, it was the opposite, because as a black man, it's like, oh yeah, I play a lot of Western classical music. They're like, oh, it's like, really? And it's the opposite end of the spectrum. So I think the elitist possessive investment in classical music that is out there, it needs to adapt. It needs to evolve. And I think it is. And that happens from the top down, from the patrons to the musicians to the administration to the organizations that oversee the administration. All that, it happens at every level, removing that possessive investment. I think that's a really toxic thing. That wasn't the question, but I feel like I had to talk about it though.
Yeah, please.
That just ties into the uppity preconception. When you say classical music, most people think of you wearing a white wig and sitting at a harpsichord.
Right.
Yeah. And that's just not the case.
Not
classical music bangs.
Yeah.
Or as they say, it bops. That's what the kids are saying now, right?
Is that okay?
I don't know. I like to embarrass
Slaps.
my students.
Slaps is another one.
Yeah.
Yeah. And my second question, after all the impact that COVID has done to classical music, what do you think is something positive that will enhance and carry on in our profession? You slightly tapped in on this earlier, though, but I don't know if you have another thought.
In the new ecosystem that will happen, that is forming right now, I think that there are things that will stick. The accessibility, we've broken down the barrier of travel. We can now have, high fidelity lessons and classes with musicians from across the world with little to no latency. And I don't see that going away anytime soon. I do see, musicians traveling in person again and playing and doing that, but I don't see that going away. I see that evolving, and I think that there's a new market that is forming for the streaming arts. And I'll say the streaming arts because I don't think it's going to stay in its current form. I don't think what people are doing right now is going to last forever, and we're putting out a digital subscription, but you're going to find new artists that are born through this ecosystem that I can't even imagine what they're going to be like. But the students coming up in school now are much more comfortable in this than we are. There's going to be some really cool stuff coming out like the next 2 years, year and a half, artistically. Also, it's the perfect time, like I said earlier, jump off the ledge and take that chance of, if you've been holding back and wanting to try something, now is the perfect time, because we have all the time. YOLO? So I think that we'll see a lot more people creating their art, and not following necessarily the path that we've settled into. This whole, go to a music school, study music, audition for jobs. We're going to see a lot more people who are forging their own path.
Yeah, literally, there's people that don't have to stick to the status quo of how we pursue our careers. And I think that some of my past guests have actually mentioned this before in revamping the music education system in classical music. Why is it almost required for us to go to an undergraduate and a master's, and then maybe probably all these other artistic diplomas or whatever, with the cost of tuition at these places? It's, it's really
astronomical.
Yeah. And is it necessary? Like, aren't there other ways of achieving the same level of education? Anyway, I don't want to open that can of worms tonight.
That's a whole different conversation that I would love to have. And I'm actually in the process of having this conversation. I'm so fortunate to work at a wonderful university that asks these questions and challenges the curriculum in that way.
Right.
Because you're right. The world continues to change. The music landscape continues to change. And our education model hasn't really adapted much in the past 100 years from that. Whereas in the last 10 years, the music culture has changed. Like, just thinking about numbers, right? Classical music sales represent only 6% of music sales total. 6%. Yet it is the I want to say the main topic you study. It's like what's taught mostly in conservatories and schools throughout the country. You're not seeing
the gains coming out of getting a degree. Yeah, I'm sorry.
You're not seeing, no, but you're right. You're not seeing curriculum that reflects the current
market
situation. And when you do, it's only on the surface. It's like, it might be in the form of, a lecture class on the Beatles or a lecture class on hip hop in the 80s. It's like, I think that there is space in our music schools and conservatories to get up to date without sacrificing or even without threatening the history. It's not a threat to the history of classical music. I think classical music is going to be around. It's evolving. I think we need to let it evolve, embrace the change as opposed to fight it. And that could be a controversial subject for a lot of people. And I'm happy to have that conversation.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat as you. Let's have that conversation rather than just not question and keep your head down and barrel through things,
Yeah.
Are there any platforms or websites for our listeners to learn more about you or any upcoming projects?
Yes.
Let's get the list.
Hopefully I remember them all, right? So Beauty Slap just released this past March. We released some singles, one called Qualia and one is a rap single called 10 in the Lobby. Really funny, but I rap.
Yeah, it's awesome.
I am also working on a manuscript right now. This is really interesting. I'm working on a manuscript of opera arias for bass trombone. It's coming out really soon. I'm just wrapping that up, working with the publisher now, but it's called Book of Arias, and you can check that out, bookofarias.com. You can listen to me on a couple recordings. So the most recent Cleveland Orchestra CDs I am on.
Awesome.
I know they released a recent Schubert album, and then the New Century. I'm on volumes 2 and 3 of that, which is nice. You can listen to me with River City Brass, rivercitybrass.org. C Street Brass, we have an album out, cstreetbrass.com, thebeautyslap.com. We have a couple albums out. I'm on the YouTubes. I think I'm all over them internets, as the kids say. And you can follow me, Hakeem Bilal Music, on Instagram. Find me on Facebook. I'm around.
Okay. There's plenty of places.
Plenty of places.
Not to forget about your podcast, The Plain Pod, as well.
Yes, The Plain Pod and The Plain Show, which airs every Thursday at 10 p.m. on Twitch.
Nice. And if you enjoyed listening to this podcast, go ahead and press that subscribe button and leave a review on Apple Podcasts. The reviews and ratings help this podcast be more visible to others, and it's a free way to support the podcast. Another free way is to tell your friends and family about it, and you can become part of the Haydn Behind the Music Stand family by donating to our Patreon page at patreon.com/Haydn Music Stand. Don't forget, there's a Spotify playlist available that contains all the pieces we've discussed on the podcast, so you can kind of keep up with what we're talking about. It's a huge library right now. Do not be discouraged. It's really all great music, and the link is always in the description of each episode. Follow us on social media, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, all at Haydn Music Stand. Hakeem, thank you so much for sharing your evening with me. I am so happy that we finally got to meet each other because it's kindred spirits here, So
Yes. Thank you so much for having me. And everyone smash that like and subscribe button. Smash it if you haven't already. Subscribe. This is great stuff happening.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. I cannot wait. I hope that we can talk again.
Oh, anytime. I mean, whenever. And thanks for listening.
Say bye, Sushi.